Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. My name is Dumidu. I'm the president of Dr. Mikel J. Harry, Six Sigma Management Institute of Asia. On behalf of myself and my company, I would like to welcome all of you who have joined this webinar from all over the world. For people who do not know about Six Sigma Management Institute, it's an institute which was founded by Dr. Mikel J. Harry, who is the co-creator of Six Sigma way back in year 2003. As a company, we are involved in the organization-related consulting, and also we provide training related to organization excellence, including all levels of Lean and Six Sigma training. We also help companies to manage their deployment program, assist in their QNS verification processes, and so on. But more importantly, being a company being founded by the originators of Six Sigma, we strongly believe it's our obligation to promote the goodness of Six Sigma around the world. So this particular webinar is one of those efforts that we are taking on those lines, and I hope you will enjoy this session with me during the next 45 to 1 hour. Let me also take you through a little bit about Dr. Mikel J. Harry. Dr. Mikel J. Harry, along with Bill Smith, way back in 1980, started Six Sigma in Motorola, and after Bill Smith's passing in 1997, Dr. Mikel J. Harry was instrumental in guiding many companies, including CEOs, in their Six Sigma implementation journey. These include DuPont, General Electric, Ford, Light Signal, and the list goes on. And he has saved over $520 billion of worth of savings for these companies, and he has published over 50 titles on Six Sigma, out of which Six Sigma, the breakthrough management strategy revolutionizing the world's top corporations, became Wall Street and national bestsellers. Dr. Harry is known for creation of the DMAC methodology, which was originally founded as logic filtering methodology, and then also introducing the black belt, green belt, the whole nomenclature. And more importantly, since Bill Smith's passing, he was recognized as the world's foremost authority on Six Sigma. Unfortunately, Dr. Harry passed away 3 months ago. And what you see here is the world's first ever black belt training conducted by Dr. Mikel J. Harry at Motorola, and in the background you can see Bob Calvin standing in the first row. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the webinar. So in today's discussion, I would like to highlight you some few important steps that you could consider when you start off your Six Sigma journey. The most important thing when you want to start Six Sigma or any initiative is to figure out a driving need. Now, how are you going to figure out a driving need for an organization that you're going to implement something? The first step is to study the organization. Isn't it obvious? So you need to go and get all the information about an organization before you really propose what you're going to do. In this discussion, we're going to talk about Six Sigma. So it's very essential you understand an organization's vision, mission, the strategies, the roadmap, their maturity level in terms of people, process, technology, the stage in their life cycle, and conduct a proper position assessment. This would help you to figure out few driving needs at the offset when you on a later stage try to pitch against those driving needs. As much as you study the organization, it is also essential you study the leaders, so the stakeholders of the organization. they would have different things in their agenda, and there can be things that keeps them awake at night. And that's something that you need to be concerned and interested as well. So you could pick up certain items from that agenda that could be related or reference when you may make a case for Six Sigma or any other initiatives that you're going to launch in that particular company. And of course, any company would have many initiatives that they have already taken to address the key driving needs that they have, or key problems the companies face at that particular juncture. So that is something that you have to be concerned. So if you're going to start with Lean Six Sigma, if you're going to propose the Six Sigma for an organization, it is essential that you understand what are these initiatives currently in place and try to find similarities against them, because that would help you if you want to get the buy-in of the groups who are involved in those sessions, and to talk to them and also to convince on the use of the new concept or the new initiative you're going to launch, which is Six Sigma or any other for that matter. So there are so many titles being published by many authors on relating or showcasing the integration of Six Sigma with different topics, including with ERP, with software, so different industries, hospitals or healthcare and government. So there are so many titles out there you could refer to figure out these similarities. But more importantly, what you need to do here is, once you understand what their current initiatives are up to or they're doing, you need to find out ways in which that you could figure out certain driving needs out of that. For example, if there are a particular aspect a current initiative is not addressing, that you need to identify and list down. So when you really start your pitch, if you could address those things, obviously the management going to pay their attention for you. So as you know, once you figure out the driving need, the next most important thing is to list out what Six Sigma as an initiative has to offer. Six Sigma is being viewed in different shapes by different individuals. For example, it can be viewed as a database decision-making tool, employee enrichment and engagement tool, or a capacity calculation method, total performance measurement framework. Six Sigma has many utilities, guys. So what you need to do once you prepare a list of driving needs or problems that the company is facing, which the leaders have prioritized, and the initiatives or current initiatives are right now not addressing or not focused on, against that list, you need to try finding unique value propositions out from Six Sigma. And what would you do next? You need to then prepare your pitch. You match your driving need against one of these users of Six Sigma, then you can draft your pitch for your initiative, or we call it the elevator speech in certain forums. But mind you, it's very important that you do not pitch the initiative or Six Sigma as a panacea solution. As once Jacques Welch said, putting up a Six Sigma slogan, don't expect your price earning ratio to move. In other words, Six Sigma is not a panacea. There are limitations around Six Sigma as any initiative. So you need to know the boundaries, the capabilities of Six Sigma before you really go and pitch it to your leadership, or if you're a consultant, to your clients. So once you have formed your pitch, it would look like something like this. So the pitch would have a reference to the driving need and also the unique value proposition that you have picked out of Six Sigma that which is described in the same paragraph or the pitch, so people could relate, okay, this is my driving need and this is what is Six Sigma which helps to overcome that driving need. And most of the time when you then look at the launch or pitching Six Sigma to someone, a lot of people have the tendency not to use the terminologies in the whole pitch. For example, you would not say, hey, I'm gonna launch Six Sigma which will help you to reduce waste and variation, because there can be history around Six Sigma. Maybe there's a person who tried it out, it failed, and so there's a kind of a belief it will not work. And sometimes people can have bad reference any initiative, so you have to make sure once you understand the background information of the company, maybe it's worthwhile, without naming your initiative as Six Sigma, maybe you call it as Operational Excellence Initiative, or the initiative that you do to reduce waste and variation. You do the same concept, you implement the same concept, but at the offset maybe you could figure out a nice name for your initiative that sells better. And once you have formed your pitch, it's very important you find or build facts around your pitch. There are so many sources to do that. There are competitor reports. You can show a report from a competitor and say, hey, our competitors are into Six Sigma, or our competitors are doing something in relation to Six Sigma. Conference features. There are so many conferences, and a lot of conferences do publish their proceedings, or they sell their proceedings separately. If you find a company similar to your company who have spoken about Six Sigma application, make sure you make use of those references and showcase it back to your leadership. Then there are so many social media forums like LinkedIn. There are over 1,000 groups in LinkedIn on Lean and Six Sigma. So you could go and ask the question, if quote your industry, quote your company maybe, and ask, do you think is it worthwhile implementing Six Sigma in that particular industry? Get the feedback. I'm sure there are a lot of experts will respond to you, and use that as a reference to create buy-in among your leadership. Of course, you could also use Google, as we do for many things, and to find out the uses of Six Sigma and application of Six Sigma in your respective industry. Another thing you could use is Google Trends. I'm sure you are familiar with this application. Google Trends actually tracks on search patterns of people over a period of time. And interestingly, Six Sigma as a word, as a search term, has been an interest factor for many search groups over the last 3 to 4 years. Or if you look at even patterns over the last from 2004, you could see there's constant interest on Six Sigma over any other related item, I would say. So that could be something which, when you want to pitch Six Sigma, maybe you could consider, maybe come in handy. So once you have your pitch, you have built facts around your pitch, now is the time to decide on the timing. When are you going to launch this initiative, or when are you going to pitch, use your pitch and in a forum or to your leadership? So there are so many tools to figure out the readiness factor. So these are generally called launch readiness assessment tools. In shortened forms, you can call it LRATs. So these include things like initial assessment checklist, which is something you can find, download, and a lot of people do have these kind of checklists which will help you to figure out it's time to launch, or maybe you need to wait, and you can look for consultant opinion. Or most of the time this will be the most expensive option, but depending on the consultant you might get a better opinion, which will also help you to use your pitch better in certain situations. And also you could look at best practice opinion, look at best practice forums, publications, and figure out whether it's the right time or you could even ask an expert in your industry and maybe get his or her opinion. Also, I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn is a fantastic forum. You could always go back and check with LinkedIn, explain the situation of the company, and maybe get opinions from experts for using different groups on LinkedIn, whether you are really ready to launch your initiative. Another factor is gut feel. Being in a company maybe for 5-6 years, maybe for 15 years, you would know it's the right time or not. So gut feel can come in handy. And the last assessment tool I would like to talk about is buzz meter. Buzz meter is a very simple technique where you have your pitch with you right now. So what you do, you go to a situation room where people are discussing problems. You just try to throw out your pitch into that audience. And if there's 10 people in the audience, 7 of them says, hey, this might work, or this sounds interesting. So out of 10, 7 was sounding interesting. We call that buzz meter rating at that particular situation is 70%. So these are the tools that you can use to figure out timing. Is it the right time to launch Six Sigma in your organization? When you start the launch, it is also important that you highlight what is in it for employees. Because when a new initiative is being launched, all your employees are going to find it, most of the employees will find it skeptical. They will look at it with the eye of saying, hey, are we going to lose our jobs? Or what is this all about? So it is important when you do your launch, you highlight what is in it for employees. One of the facts I would like to showcase to you here is, if you look at LinkedIn, I have taken this census or data on 25th around 2:37 Sri Lankan time. There were 2.7 million people who have referenced Six Sigma in their profiles, and there were 26,000 jobs on Six Sigma. Maybe you could go and talk about this to your employees. And also you could use published salary surveys. So what you see, the numbers you see over here are numbers published by ASQ. So which they used to highlight and say the black belt certified people used to get about 100,000 a year. So these could be some positive references to your employees when you really want to build some traction among them. Right. So once you highlight the importance of the initiatives to your employees, then you need to figure out the deployment model. Now, mainly there are 4 deployment models being discussed widely. So I would like to talk about those 4 deployment models in this session. The first model is called as the grassroots model or the bottom-up model. Is a situation where a company would send one of their staff members for Six Sigma training into one of the training companies, and once he or she come back, you expect him to deliver some results. And maybe this is to try things out, but most of the time this has been the least successful approach of implementing Six Sigma in organization, because most of the time once you get certified, there's a high possibility that person being offered by another company, and he gradually leaves the organization and the whole system collapses. The second method is called the targeted model or the problem solving approach, where you figure out the key burning issues in the organization, and then you get your experts or the team and to work on those problems and try to bring about results, and use the success stories of those projects and to go to the next level, or maybe or the ideal desired level of Six Sigma implementation, which is the enterprise-wide model. The third model is known to be as the departmental or business unit model. This is where you select a department or a business unit that you believe would support most for your initiative, which has depending on the leaders and the staff members or the nature of operation, then you would go there, implement Six Sigma in that operation, generate results, use those success stories to implement the initiative enterprise wide. So enterprise wide, as you can see, is the ideal form of Six Sigma implementation, where you try to implement Six Sigma across the company as an enterprise wide initiative. Any initiative that an organization start off, the ideal goal is to go enterprise wide. Alright, so we discussed about the deployment models. Let me just give you kind of an example of a deployment model. Let's say targeted model approach. So how target model approach generally starts is where, as I told you, it's around finding out the burning problems and then figuring out projects and building success out of those projects and using those stories to take your initiative organization wide. Now generally in a target model, generally you look at the voice of customer feedback or voice of your surveys, research, customer complaints. You look at pain points, you look at your financials to figure out pain points, your operational performance, or even benchmarking reports, subject matter experts. You go and ask them what needs to be improved in the company, and you come up with a list of problems, and you build relationship of amongst these problems to figure out which are the ones that you need to prioritize when you start approaching or applying Six Sigma for that matter. So the most of the companies who are doing into targeted model uses different forms of prioritization techniques, and there's no harm in any of those techniques. It's just that the ideal important factors has to be highlighted. Once you have figured out your problems, you could do a bit of visual presentations of your problems. This is one of the examples which all your the company's problems or the projects are being mapped across the processes, so everybody understands where the projects are being done and also the status of those projects. Once your projects are set, identified, in any model, in any of those models, the next activity is to figure out the tool set and the methodology you're going to use. When you have a list of problems, next option is to solve it, or the next step is to solve them. So to solve a problem, you need to know tools, problem solving tools. So some of the problems you might be able to just solve using your logic and intuition, where you might not know might not require any of the knowledge of problem solving tools. You just use your experience. So you could solve some of the problems, which we call in this particular diagram the ground fruits. You could pick the ground fruits that are fallen out from a tree. You can just pick them. But if you want to pluck the low-hanging fruit, then you need to know a little bit of tools. So that is where the basic tools of quality comes in. But if you really want to get into the sweet fruit, you need some tools. In a tree, you need maybe a ladder, you maybe some kind of techniques to figure out how to pluck those fruits. So similarly, you need to know more advanced tools. So learning of tools is very important to deep dive and also understand situations and come up with solutions. But the real prime fruit comes through design changes. As many, if you've read recent articles published even on lean, majority of improvement in terms of lean and Six Sigma can be derived by designing at design stage itself. If you design your processes right at the beginning, there's less likelihood that you need to undertake constant problem solving exercises, or even you have to deal with constant fire. And as you know, in the world there are lean fans, there are Six Sigma fans, but it's just like there are people who like to have ice cream and there are people who like to have brownies, but there are some people who like to have both together. So in this case, I'm a fan of ice cream with brownies. I believe, as you know, if you look at the core of lean focuses on creating a culture to reduce waste, variation, and stress on resources. In Japanese, mura, and mori. And it talks about 5 main principles of achieving that goal. If you take Six Sigma talks about reducing variation and improving quality in your production processes. And it talks about the DMAC methodology founded by Dr. Michael J. Harry way back as the process of doing it. But if you really look closely, Mura or variation is already being discussed under lean, and quality or defects or rework is discussed under Muda only. So fundamental focus of these two concepts can complement each other or is very much similar. And in terms of methodology and approach, a lot of people believe the math is more structured and more robust methodology in terms of undertaking projects or doing any improvement initiative. So when Lean Six Sigma launched some time back, the main background was to take the focus of Lean, which covers many areas, and use the methodology adopted by DMAC. So I think if a company is doing Lean, it's always important, it will always be beneficial if we incorporate Six Sigma and vice versa. The advantage of using Six Sigma in a lean operation or lean enterprise would be Six Sigma or Sigma as a metric would give you the opportunity to report your performance on one single metric, because C value can represent, or any metric that you have, any performance metric in your organization can be converted into C value. And the advantage of reporting things on Sigma metric is that it is a unidirectional metric. You don't have to look for whether your achievement is lower is the better or higher is the better, because Z is always higher is the better. So it's a unidirectional metric, which makes performance reporting very easy to interpret, and also help companies to and processes to benchmark against each other. And also, if you take a scenario like a value stream map in Lean, general approach is you would report cycle time for a process step, and then you look at the non-value adding time component of it, then figure out to do a Kaizen project, a scope project to eliminate those non-value adding component. And then once you improve the process, you will look for standardization, and that's how Lean progress. But when you know Six Sigma, what you would do once you're the standardized cycle time after improvement, you will then look at how can I go one step further. You will look at things like variation among operators, and even you look at things like look at cycle time as a distribution, irrespective of just taking averages. Now lead time is generally counted by adding on cycle time and interface time, so it's more like adding of averages. But when you look at it as a Six Sigma mindset, you will look at these things as distributions, and you use something like simulation techniques to figure out the ideal distribution of lead time in a process. So there are advantages that a lean company could achieve by learning or adopting Six Sigma. So once you've figured out your methodology, whether it's Six Sigma is the topic of discussion I'm going to talk to you through. So if you decided Six Sigma is your main initiative, then you have to start training people on the initiative, on the methodology. Now a lot of companies, when they start training, they have this tendency of training people on standard curriculum. But most of the time, it depends on how you train, or the people you train. So imagine if you're training people on tools that are not used on a yearly basis. You're training the tool set covered in your training, there can be things just daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly being used. If you have things which are never being used, you're actually creating waste in this whole training. So when you do train people, you have to be very mindful about the audience and the process that they work. So if they do not have the opportunity to apply those tools and techniques, when you provide training for a particular process or people, you need to be mindful of their maturity levels. And this is a very important fact, because a lot of people are fond of standard training delivery. For example, before starting a training program, you need to look at the maturity of the process, because that can be measured using different metrics. As you know, there are a lot of capability measures out there, and the maturity of people, maturity in terms of their competencies. What are their competency gaps? Are they in a position to comprehend the tools that you're going to talk about? So this is very important that you do this analysis to each and every process before start training the people working in those processes. It's just like in case of tires, you have the all seasons tires, like countries like Sri Lanka uses. We have 3 seasons, guys. We have the 3 seasons are, for your information, hot, very hot, and very very hot. So we always use the all seasons tire. But in countries, as you know, like in Europe and Northern America, you will always have a winter tire to be used during the winter season. So it's the same approach. And also, when you look at tools and techniques, it's also very essential you look at alternative tools that you can incorporate into your curriculum. Now in Goa in India, people use the washing machine, yes, the machine that you use to wash your clothes, as a lassi making machine. Lassi is a curd based drink, and they use the washing machine to make drinks. So you have to be creative in your approach on using tools. Can this tool be used in different scenarios? Now I don't know how many of you realize the importance of the CCTV system you have installed in your operations. Now take example of drawing a value stream map. The process of value stream map, you go there, you stand in a circle, and you start looking at observing people, and then you go to each process step, takes down their timing and so on. But if you heard of things like Hawthorne studies, people have proven that when you've been observed, you tend to perform better. So under supervision, people perform better. But you have a CCTV system that keeps an eye on all entire operation, and more importantly, captures the time accurately. So why you waste time going to each and every process step when you could use your CCTV system? So it should be a tool in your tool set that you train people on, and can help to save a lot of time. So this is how you need to be innovative in your training delivery. But when it comes to practitioners, things are different, because they're supposed to be the guys who've been training your people. So there's this famous saying that any Six Sigma training is good, but not all certifications. What do you mean by here is that a practitioner, the guys who are really into implementing, guiding companies on Six Sigma, they should learn all the tools. Why I'm saying this? Because they are not supposed to be in one organization or one process. They're supposed to go from an organization, from a process to another. So they should know the tools to the whole entire tool set to figure out in a situation what tools will be suitable for that particular process or operation that they're working in. This is a very important aspect, because a lot of the concept is being diluted and polluted because the practitioner training has been compromised. Now ISO came up with a standard in 2011 establishing some guidelines around the hours of training in terms of different levels of Six Sigma training, which is a good factor. There are a little bit of controversials on how they came about these standards, who were involved, what are their interests, and so on. But I believe that is something which is useful for companies to actually understand the importance of practitioner training. It also goes about listing out a curriculum for the training, which is pretty good. And if you look at the original program, when Dr. Mikel created the Black Belt program, it was designed for 160 hours. But with time, this is what you see is a calendar of our training for Black Belts. We have developed it over the period, added a lot of content. It goes right now for 290 hours. So practitioner training is critical, essential, and I can't emphasize this fact. It's very important. If you're pursuing to be a practitioner, you're black belt, master black belt, lean experts, you must learn as much as tools as possible. Alright, so once you have trained your staff members, your practitioners, we discussed all that, it's the time you start on your projects. Now, I spoke about prioritization a little bit when I discussed the targeted model, but let's look at some basic principles on project prioritization. One of the key factors when you prioritize projects, obviously, you need to give emphasis on VOC, voice of customer related projects. There are a lot of tools out there which you could use to you prioritize your projects based on VOC, and it's very essential because all your leaders and everyone in organization will be interested to improve the experience of your customers. And once you, apart from the VOC related projects, when you start picking up projects, you'll come about various number of projects, and some projects would generate high level of value to the organization, and some would be less. It's always better when you're starting to pick up the projects that has high value rather than taking up a bunch of projects that provides less value at the end of the day, because the entire effort in a Six Sigma initiative at the initial phases should be revolved around creating buying. So you have to be selective in your projects. If you are given the authority, always select projects with high value rather than selecting a bunch of projects that would ultimately would generate low value to your organization. And also, if you look at on a certain principle basis, if you have projects with high variation and low volume, or versus low variation, high volume, you should always look for a project which has low variation and high volumes, because it's easy for you to work on those projects and generate revenue, or generate savings rather. So it's important you be selective in the initial phases, because the whole idea is around creating buying. And then, of course, there's easy ways of prioritizing is to look at the difficulty of those projects and the return those projects would generate in return. So you always would look to pick up projects which are easy and gives high return. Right. So that's a little bit about projects, and it's also important, as much as you select projects, you select the right champions for your project. Now, why I'm saying this, if you are lucky enough to pick up a champion who has high level of support and high level of power in your projects or in the business unit you're going to implement Lean Six Sigma, or Six Sigma rather, you are always going to be better off, isn't it? So analyze your leaders, understand this level of support and interest around Six Sigma, and if you can, make them the champions for your projects. So there's high probability of success when you do that. I hope all of you will agree with me on this point. And when you assign project leaders, find the best of the best to lead your projects. Doesn't it make sense to get your best to do your projects? Because it'll have high level of probability of success. A lot of people, when they appoint project leaders, they go by designations. Should not be the case. You need to find out the bullets, I would say, in the organization who would really go out there, get things done and deliver results. And those are the people you should train on Six Sigma and make your project leads. Once you have figured out the leaders for your projects, the next task is to figure out the right team members for your projects. So obviously you will have to include some of the members depending on the nature of the project to be part of each and every project. But have you ever thought of the informal structure in place in every organization? Informal structure in organization is run by influential leaders. And if you could make influential leaders in the organization part of your project, it will help you to build traction on the initiative. Now, how to find influential leaders? One of the methods you could look at the parties or events that you organize in the organization, and look at individuals that everyone tries to rally around, and the individuals that everybody tries to take a lead from. So those guys have to be part of your project teams in some way. Or you could even look at your PABX records to figure out who has taken the highest number of calls to different individuals. So those people can be part of your communication channels. So these are very soft things you could do, simple things you could do that would help to create traction in your whole initiative. Once you have appointed your champions, the team leaders, formed your teams, the next most important thing is to keep them engaged all the time. Engagement needs to be created by different initiatives, and these initiatives should be creative as much as possible, and it has to be not random. It should be a constant exercise to keep the engagement around the initiative. So there can be different initiatives being introduced to your organization depending the nature of its operation. For example, you could have a quiz, a newsletter going in, a drama being organized. So anything that keeps the interest around the subjects among the people who are involved in implementing and deploying Six Sigma, in this case, in your organizations. As much as you take efforts to create engagement in the organization, it is also essential that you reward the proper behaviors, positive behaviors among the groups within the organization. Also reward the people who achieve their project goals or targets on constant basis. And some companies have this tendency to reward, or for example, if you're having a graduation ceremony, have it every 2 years or 3 years. This is done to retain people. However, it is found this method is less effective in most of the circuits because people in nature like rewards on time. So engagement is important, as well as the reward in terms of positive behavior, and celebrating success is another important factor to have a successful Six Sigma initiative. As you know, when you tend to reward the positive behavior, the right people, the others also wants to be in that category and group of people, and but make sure always you do not end up in a situation like this in the picture. You always reward the right person for right behavior. Finally, let me share some points that you could also consider during your Six Sigma implementation journey. Now, a lot of companies have this belief that you need to follow standardized storyboards. Well, there are pros and cons of that particular thought, but always you need to try taking efforts to avoid over-analysis. and also having complex storyboards, because if you have achieved your results and you spend a lot of time in building your storyboards, that can be considered as non-value adding. And also, I think a lot of you will agree, when you're reviewing projects, say if you're a multinational company and you're reviewing projects of different countries, a lot of people use this method of using audio conferences, and it has been found 70% of the time when you are having an audio conference, people do other work. So it's always simple and effective if you could always try to use video conferencing techniques. There are simple methods like Skype, or you could use formal video conferencing facility to review your projects. That also gives you proper kind of one-to-one feedback to your project leaders and champions and so on. And also, initially a lot of people have asked me this question about what statistical package to use. I would recommend to start off with Excel based statistical packages, because those are relatively less pricier than the advanced statistical packages out there, because the whole idea at the initial phases is to create buy-in, higher level of ROI. So you need to keep your initial investment down to a reasonable number. So it's better to start with Excel based software, and once you have started generating results, generating savings, you could always look at acquiring or purchasing advanced statistical software tools. And if you can, establish an internal certification system for your company. As a consultancy firm, we highly encourage our clients to have an internal certification system. We provide content and assistance to do that, because it helps you to once you establish one, to build customized content to suit your own organization. And also, having a learning portal is not a it's not a very difficult thing in modern day. And if you want to create content, you could just use your smartphone. And also, as a method for sustaining your Six Sigma initiative, it's also important that you incorporate the project goals, your tasks around Six Sigma into the performance appraisal system. So in your performance scorecard, you need to include the goals around Six Sigma. For each and every individual in the company who are involved in this process has to be assessed for what they're contributing. So the moment you also include this in performance appraisals, the project goals, tasks, savings, then people also tend to take this very seriously, and it always helps to sustain the initiative over a period of time. And some companies have this tendency of also, once a person is being sent for Six Sigma training, to get them to sign a training bond. Some companies do not have this practice, but for the companies who are having the practice of signing training bonds, it's essential that you do not sign training bonds on time based. For example, you went for this training, so you have to stay in our organization for 2 years. That's a wrong way of looking at it. What you should do instead of that is to give them targets. Say you went for Six Sigma training, you save say $10 million. The moment you make that saving to the company, you are released from the bond. So that's an approach, kind of thinking is expected when you implement Six Sigma. And also try to build your brand as much as you can, because building the brand is an important thing on your I'm talking about building the brand for Six Sigma for your organization is an important thing for you to attract talent. And also, if you could go around to conferences, industry forums, and share your experience. Say one of your clients happens to be in the audience, don't you think the client's representative would be delighted to see your company is a company that has constantly tried to improve the processes or the products that you offer by adopting Six Sigma? Any client likes to see the suppliers, providers improving on their processes and products on day-to-day basis. So if you could share those good things that you do, it's not going to harm your company. And also one of the other factors that you need to do on a constant basis, when you get new employees, you need to induct them on Six Sigma, and also the training and retraining of your resources on the concept has to happen on a constant basis. What do you mean by this is, if your black belt goes through black belt training in a particular year, after 2 years you will have to send him back for retraining, because over a period of time, as you know, the knowledge content, the knowledge base can increase, and also the retention ability of humans can go down. And also make a practice of reporting your net savings. Some companies have the practice of reporting net savings in the annual reports, which is a good factor, because it gets communicated to the shareholders, and shareholders obviously would love to hear things like that and maybe invest more in your company. And it's also essential you keep trying to innovate the ways and means that you apply Lean Six Sigma in your organization. Now, a long time back, even Dr. Mikel Harry was involved in developing a cartoon series on Six Sigma. So what I'm trying to say here, now, first generation of Six Sigma was focused around defect reduction or improving quality way back in Motorola. Then started the second generation of Six Sigma, which is focused around reducing cost, like from companies like General Electric. And then the third generation of Six Sigma focused around creating velocity of value for organizations. The fourth generation of Six Sigma actually focused on Six Sigma way of thinking. How can you use Six Sigma way of thinking to gain personal improvement, personal development? So Dr. Mikel Harry introduced a concept called the Great Discovery, highlighting this process, and it's a fantastic approach how you use Six Sigma way of thinking for your personal improvement and also for personal development. So likewise, your company should always look at new areas in which you could apply Six Sigma and come up with innovative ways of making use out of the principles and uses of Six Sigma. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to take a look at the summary of what we've been discussing during this webinar. So I started by highlighting the importance of figuring out a driving need for your organizations when you start implementing or start to kick off your Six Sigma journey. So this can be identified by understanding and studying your organization's context and the stage in life cycle, the strategy, roadmap, vision, everything, to figure out what your organization is requiring at that particular point of time. You also need to look into the leadership agenda. What are their key pain points, because that could be a driving need that you could address using your Six Sigma launch or Six Sigma implementation. And also you need to look at what initiative the organization has undertaken at that particular point of time, find the weaknesses or rather gaps of those initiatives that you could address using Six Sigma implementation. And once the list of driving needs are ready, then it's a time for you to figure out the list of unique value propositions of Six Sigma by understanding and studying the uses of Six Sigma. Then you will compare the list of unique value propositions against the driving needs and to figure out the best match, and that would create your pitch. A pitch would consist of unique value proposition that addresses majority or the most prioritized driving needs in your list of driving needs. And once the pitch is ready, what you do is to build facts around your pitch. And you could use different methodologies to find facts to prove your pitch. And when the pitch is ready and your facts are ready, then you need to start looking at a proper time for your launch. And that is where readiness assessment techniques comes into play. I spoke about launch readiness assessment techniques of different kinds to figure out the right timing for your launch. And once you do the launch, it's also important you highlight the importance of what is in it for employees. So this can be done by highlighting different industry facts, and mainly because when you start a new initiative, there's a tendency your employees to have kind of tension if they do not know of the proper use of the concept. And then you need to figure out a proper deployment model. I spoke about 4 generic deployment models. The most desired model is the enterprise-wide model, and that's the goal of any initiative. So once your model is ready, it's important you provide training, and training has to be provided based on the people maturity and the maturity of the processes that they are working in, and it should focus on competencies rather than skills. And once your people are trained and ready, you could start on your projects. And I spoke about some prioritization techniques that you could use to generate faster ROI, and uh, select the right champions who support you the most and more influential in the organization, select the right project leaders, and select the right members. And don't forget to add in some influential leaders into your project teams. And once the projects are running, it's important you keep all parties involved engaged by implementing or starting different engagement initiative. It has to be an ongoing process to sustain Six Sigma over a period of time. And also you need to reward positive behavior of individuals, and also reward accomplishment achievement of project leaders, project teams on time, and celebrate success. And I also spoke about some of the other important factors you could use during a Six Sigma journey that might be helpful. Finally, as you all know, Six Sigma is a journey. If you look at the 100-meter Olympic record in 1991, Carl Lewis broke that record by recording 9.86 seconds. In 1999, Maurice Green bettered that record by recording 9.79 seconds. And the Lightning Bolt in 2009 bettered it by recording a time of 9.58 seconds. If you look at the timings, guys, it's just seconds, but it has taken years. So Six Sigma is a journey. The results comes through the years, and you need to be patient, and you need to keep persevering on the methodology and applications to achieve higher rate of success. The velocity of value or velocity of success is determined by your effort as well as your the rigorous or robustness of your application process. And initial years of your implementation is more likely to generate higher rate of success, because you will be able to hunt down big fish in terms of your projects and applications. But the challenge comes in the subsequent years. So the constant understanding of the principles and its users will help you to innovate and sustain the initiative over a period of time. So at this particular point, I would like to hand this session back to Hannah to take a few questions. And Hannah, it's over to you.
Thank you, Dumidu, for this very informative presentation. Before we proceed with the question and answer session, I would like to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 13053 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. ISO 13053 helps you in improving your business processes and increasing their quality performances. For more information, please visit our website, pcb.com/training. Now, without further ado, we will read some of the questions from the attendees regarding today's presentation. The first question is, how to expand Six Sigma implementation to suppliers or other key stakeholders of your organization?
Right. So when it comes to suppliers, one of the things is that you need to figure out which suppliers. Now, whether you're going to do this for all your suppliers and you're going to select suppliers that who are affected or who are really directly impacting your key processes. So first is step is to figure out the list of suppliers. Once you figure out the list of suppliers, it's you need to they need to have a kind of a reason behind to work towards you implementing something like Six Sigma or any other initiative. So you need to make sure certain expectations are very clear in terms of the contractual sense, or the expectation sense, or your expectations understanding with your supplier. So that is very important for them, for any person to start off Six Sigma. It could be you, or maybe a consultant. You could ask a consultant to look into the supplier, or maybe you could request a supplier that your expectation has to be clear offset. Once that is done, of course, it's always important as a company, as a customer, if you could engage in the implementation process. This will give you assurance about the process that they're following, and also you will also get preference from supplier in certain situations, because you help them to implement a system that helps them to improve their processes. Those are the very key things I think I could mention at this particular point of time. But there are certain other factors also that you could look at. If you contact me after this, I might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that. Hannah?
Thank you, Dumidu. Because of time limitation, I regret to inform you that we will only be answering one more question, while the rest of the questions will be answered by Dumidu via email. The question is, what is the difference between generic and domain-specific Six Sigma education?
Right. So, well, any concept can be when you train or teach people on training, it's very important that you understand the audience. Now, for example, if you take any tool which is covered in Six Sigma, depending on the industry, the application example has to change. And also, in certain industries, you need to understand there are fantastic tools that you could use as part of your tool set. Now, for example, if you take facility management for that matter, if you're teaching something like spaghetti diagram, you should also talk about how your access card system or RFID system, if you have, how can you use that to build that spaghetti diagram using your building management system. So that customization, sometimes as a trainer you might not be able to do unless you really know about that domain. So that is where, when you develop your training material, it's always helpful you get use of subject matter expertise, subject matter experts in that particular domain. And this is something that few training companies actually really interested of doing, because they don't want to get anybody involved in some who does not have any background over Six Sigma. But it's always a best choice. Take your module, go to an expert, sit with him and say, does it make sense? Ask a question, does this make sense? And add examples, and maybe you could ask some experts to explain some of the tools back to the audience. So these are some of the tools, or techniques rather, that you could use. But in terms of approach wise, DMAC remains same. It's just how you take it towards the industry or the domain is where the your skill, your competence come into play. And that always it's always best to customize to suit in terms, not in terms of the approach, in terms of the tools and techniques that you teach. And that selecting, when you select tools, make sure you also consider the tools already available in that particular domain. Hannah?
Thank you once again for this presentation, Dumidu. It was an honor having you as a presenter. I would like to thank also all the attendees for joining us today. Please be reminded that this webinar will be recorded and posted in our YouTube channel and also in our SlideShare account. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey about the presentation, and we would really appreciate it if you could complete it and provide us with your feedback. We hope you enjoyed our webinar, and we wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you very much for having me again, Hannah and PCB. And all of you have joined from all over the world. Have a pleasant day and have a good one. In my own language, I would like to wish you Ayubowan. Have a good one, guys.